Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into something ancient, brutal, and strangely familiar. A world of chamber pots, crowded tenements, and endless toil. This isn't the Rome you've seen in glossy movies or marble museums. No emperors, no gladiator jewels, just the daily grind of survival in a city built on the backs of people history forgot. So, before we descend into the underbelly of the Roman Empire, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're into this kind of slow, gritty storytelling, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this little sleep experiment travels. Alright, turn the lights down low. Maybe throw on a fan or get settled under the covers because you're about to wake up in ancient Rome. And odds are you're not making it to nightfall. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Rome. Not in a palace, not in a marble villa surrounded by fountains and toga-clad servants feeding you grapes. No, you've landed where most people lived, where the plumbing is theoretical. The walls are one good fart away from collapse, and your upstairs neighbor is always stomping around like a gladiator on leg day. You're in an insolent the Roman version of an apartment building. Sounds promising, right? Maybe something with a courtyard, a bit of sunlight. Wrong. The Latin word insula literally means island, and that's the first clue that you are absolutely stranded. You're on the 4th floor, if you're lucky. Anything higher, and you're basically living in the rafters of a fire hazard. These buildings are made of brick, wood, and wishful thinking. They sway in the wind, lean against each other like drunk friends, and have the structural integrity of a stale loaf of bread. And speaking of bread, don't even think about making toast. Open flames are banned because one bad cooking accident, and the whole block goes up like a Saturnalia bonfire. Your room is about the size of a modern walk-in closet. There's a catused generously made of rope and straw, and a threadbare blanket that smells like every person who's ever used it before you. The walls are damp, stained, and close enough together that if you lie on your side, you can touch both without moving. You have no windows. Light filters in from a crack under the door and from a hole someone punched through the roof with a broom handle 3 tenants ago. There's no privacy. You share this space with 2 other people, one of whom is coughing with such dramatic flair that you briefly wonder if you're living in a poorly written tragedy. Spoiler, it's not drama. It's probably tuberculosis. Outside, the morning begins not with birdsong, but with the rumble of wooden carts and the melodious yelling of vendors hawking olives, fish, and something that may have been bred in a former life. A donkey brays like it's dying. Children cry like they're dying. And someone's already arguing over taxes to floors below. You stretch. Bad idea. Your back cracks like a papyrus scroll in a drought, and you immediately regret trying to act like someone whose spine hasn't been curled into a question mark by years of hard labor and a diet that consists mostly of beans and regret. You're about 27 years old, which makes you one of the older folks in the neighborhood. Most people die before 40, usually from some combination of injury, infection, or inhaling whatever leaks from the latrine pit every summer. You shuffle out of bed, barefoot. Of course, you're barefoot. Shoes cost money, and if you had money, you wouldn't be living here. The floor is cold and sticky. Is it wine? Is it urine? Is it olive oil? It's probably all 3. You step around your neighbor's sleeping form And try not to kick the communal chamber pot. It's full. It's always full. Time to relieve yourself. Great. You've got options. Option 1. The aforementioned chamber pot, which will soon be dumped. Drumroll. Please, right out the window. There's a whole system to it. You're supposed to shout, "Cave," before you launch the contents onto the street below, which means watch out in Latin. But let's be honest, nobody does. The streets reek of urine, feces, spoiled food, and dead dreams. The gutters are open, the waste flows freely, and if you're lucky, the rain hasn't washed it all back toward your front door. Hygiene, that's adorable. There are no showers, no soap, no toothpaste. You might wash your face in the public fountain if you're feeling fancy and don't mind sharing your morning splash with 14 other people and a stray dog licking a wound. You scrape your teeth with a stick, maybe rub some ash on them if you're feeling bougie. Your breath smells like a fermented mixture of old lentils and existential dread. Still, you pull on your Tunicure 1 tunicanned head outside. It's made of rough wool or linen, stained in ways you've long stopped trying to identify. It smells like mildew and human. No deodorant, no underwear. You tie it at the waist with a rope and hope it holds. If not, congratulations, you've just invented public indecency. Not that anyone cares. Modesty in Rome is mostly reserved for statues and upper-class poetry. Stepping outside is like entering a war zone of the senses. The street is already packed. Vendors scream, beggars shout, oxen defecate mid-step, flies swarm in thick clouds over the fish stalls. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is being murdered, door possibly just expressing itself. Someone's cooking something that smells like disappointment. Your neighbor's child runs past barefoot and covered in something that might be jam, might be blood, might be both. You make your way down the street toward the communal bakery, one of the few luxuries you share with the rest of your block. You hand over your government-issued grain ration, a lump of barley flour wrapped in cloth. The baker takes it, adds it to the others, and hours later, you'll get back a small, hard, blackened loaf. It's barely edible, mostly ash from the public oven's coals, but hey, it's warm and it's yours. Assuming no one steals it. First, breakfast. Sure, let's pretend. If you're lucky, you get a bit of pulsa, thick gruel, made from boiled grains. It's what most poor Romans eat. Every day, grain, water, maybe some chickpeas, maybe not. If you're having a good day, there's a drizzle of olive oil on top. If you're having a bad day, the drizzle is rat urine and you don't know it yet. Meat, only for the rich. Milk spoils too fast. Cheese, maybe eggs, only if you steal them from a chicken that lives under your stairs. Most protein comes from beans, lentils, and dreams. If you want fruit, it better be in season and unspoiled. Otherwise, you're just gnawing on the husk of an overripe fig and pretending it's a plum. You might stop by the latrina, public latrina, to take care of business. If you enjoy the company of 12 other people doing the exact same thing, the bench has a series of holes, no dividers, and a shared sponge on a stick dipped in vinegar. That's the Roman version of toilet paper. You rinse it, wipe, and repeat. And you wonder why nobody makes eye contact in these places. After all, it's barely mid-morning. You haven't even started work yet, but before you leave for your day job, which, spoiler, is physically and emotionally crushing, you pause for a moment and look around. The street is alive, smelly, chaotic. dangerous but alive. Kids scream and chase each other. A street performer juggles knives with questionable skill. A merchant shouts about the healing power of fermented fish sauce, and the city breathes, chokes, and burps in one never-ending symphony of humanity. Your landlord, never seen him, repairs. Don't hold your breath. If your building collapses, it's not considered a tragedy, it's considered a Tuesday. Fires are common, so are floods. So is sudden, unexplained death. You're a cog in a system that views you as replaceable. You're not a citizen, you're a warm body in a census scroll. Your value is measured in how quietly you suffer, and you will suffer because this is ancient Rome. Not the Rome of marble forums and golden laurels. Not the Rome of historians and Hollywood. This is the Rome of slums and soot, of crowded insulae and chamber pots, of grit and groaning humanity. You're not Cicero, you're not Caesar, you're not even close. You're a peasant on the 4th floor, praying the 3rd doesn't catch fire again. And it's only the beginning of your day. Congratulations, you've survived your first Roman night without being robbed, choked by smoke, or crushed by your neighbor's drunken body, rolling onto your sleeping mat. Not bad, but the gods are generous. Today and you've earned the privilege of waking up to the sweet, piercing sound of yelling. It's not an alarm clock. It's never an alarm clock. It's your neighbor yelling at his wife, or the vendor below your window screaming about fish, or the chamber pot hitting the cobblestones after someone above you dumped last night's wine and body fluids out the window. Morning in ancient Rome begins not with birdsong, but with complaints, sewage, and regret. Your eyes crack open to a ceiling so low you could punch it sitting up. You're lying on a straw mat shared with your younger sibling, your cousin, possibly a stranger, who paid your landlord 2 denarii to squat in the corner overnight. The air smells like feet, garlic, and mildew. You wonder briefly if you died and woke up in Hades, but no, you're still alive. Unfortunately, your home, generously called an insulus, a Roman apartment building made of wood, dreams, and flammable lies. You're on the 3rd floor, which is slightly less deadly than the 5th. Higher up means cheaper rent and a better chance of dying when the whole building inevitably collapses. Down below, the rich enjoy sturdier homes and indoor plumbing. Up here, you enjoy rats, water leaks, and the subtle creaking that reminds you this structure is held together by hope and mold. You swing your legs over the side of your mat and immediately regret. Your landlord, never seen him, repairs. Don't hold your breath. If your building collapses, it's not considered a tragedy, it's considered a Tuesday. Fires are common, so are floods. So is sudden, unexplained death. You're a cog in a system that views you as replaceable. You're not a citizen, you're a warm body in a census scroll. Your value is measured in how quietly you suffer. And you will suffer because this is ancient Rome, not the Rome of marble forums and golden laurels, not the Rome of historians and Hollywood. This is the Rome of slums and soot, of crowded insulae and chamber pots, of grit and groaning humanity. You're not Cicero, you're not Caesar, you're not even close. You're a peasant on the 4th floor, praying the 3rd doesn't catch fire again. And it's only the beginning of your day. Congratulations, you've survived your first Roman night without being robbed, choked by smoke, or crushed by your neighbor's drunken body rolling onto your sleeping mat. Not bad, but the gods are generous. Today and you've earned the privilege of waking up to the sweet, piercing sound of yelling. It's not an alarm clock. It's never an alarm clock. It's your neighbor yelling at his wife, or the vendor below your window screaming about fish, or the chamber pot hitting the cobblestones after someone above you dumped last night's wine and body fluids out the window. Morning in ancient Rome begins not with birdsong, but with complaints, sewage, and regret. Your eyes crack open to a ceiling so low you could punch it sitting up. You're lying on a straw mat shared with your younger sibling, your cousin, possibly a stranger, who paid your landlord 2 denarii to squat in the corner overnight. The air smells like feet, garlic, and mildew. You wonder briefly if you died and woke up in Hades, but no, you're still alive. Unfortunately, your home generously called an insulus, a Roman apartment building made of wood, dreams, and flammable lies. You're on the 3rd floor, which is slightly less deadly than the 5th. Higher up means cheaper rent and a better chance of dying when the whole building inevitably collapses. Down below, the rich enjoys sturdier homes and indoor plumbing. Up here, you enjoy rats, water leaks, and the subtle creaking that reminds you this structure is held together by hope and mold. You swing your legs over the side of your mat and immediately regret it. The floor is damp. It's always damp. Water, wine, blood. The answer doesn't change the fact that your only sandals were stolen last week, and you've been walking barefoot ever since. You gingerly avoid the sticky patch in the corner and stand, stretching your aching back like a cat that's being kicked down a flight of stairs. Time to wash up. Cute. There is no basin, no sink, no soap. You wipe your face with a damp cloth that may or may not have once cleaned your landlord's armpits. Your version of a morning skincare routine involves rubbing oil on your skin and then scraping it off with a curved blade called a spigel, which sounds elegant until you realize it's just ancient Roman exfoliation by pain. You're basically buttering yourself like toast and then peeling it off. If you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse and have a few coins left, maybe you can get cleaner later. But right now, hygiene is a luxury. You settle for smearing your face with whatever water you find in a communal jar and call it refreshed. Now comes breakfast. Brace yourself. The Roman equivalent of a power breakfast is nothing. The morning meal is called ientaculum, which is Latin for don't get your hopes up. It usually consists of yesterday's bread, hard as marble, and lovingly stored in a mouse-infested clay pot overnight. You soften it by dipping it in watered-down winter drink that tastes like vinegar with trust issues. If you're feeling fancy, maybe you get some olives or a smear of garum, the famous Roman fermented fish sauce that smells like low tide and failure. It's Rome's favorite condiment, used on everything from meat to vegetables to moments of crushing despair. It's the ketchup of the ancient world. If ketchup were made from rotting mackerel, there's no coffee, no eggs, no fruit smoothie with collagen powder. Your breakfast has one job: prevent immediate death. It succeeds, barely. You chew in silence while your neighbors scream about something, probably taxes or bread rations. Or maybe it's that guy on the 2nd floor who keeps sacrificing pigeons in the hallway. You don't ask. The rule of thumb in Roman tenement life is this: the less you know, the longer you live. Once you've gnawed your way through a slice of disappointment and sipped your wine-flavored sadness, it's time to dress for the day. Don't get excited. You have two garments, a tunic made from rough wool and a threadbare cloak that's more whole than fabric. The tunic itches, the cloak stinks, and both have been repaired so many times they're basically held together with prayers and the dreams of better fabric, underwear. Hilarious. You tie a belt around your waist to keep everything vaguely attached and hope no one notices. Your left shoulder is always exposed because the fabric keeps sliding off. The rich wear togas. You don't. Togas are for citizens, people with status. You're a plebe non-citizen if you're an immigrant. A nobody, if we're being honest. If you wear a toga, you're either delusional or planning to be arrested for impersonating someone with dignity. As you step outside, you're hit with the full sensory assault that is a Roman street. The noise is immediate. Wares, street musicians playing instruments no one asked for. Philosophers debating loudly, and someone, somewhere, is always screaming about cucumbers. It's chaos. Organized, smelly chaos. The streets themselves are paved with stones and slick with everything. Animal waste, human waste, mystery slop that no one wants to identify. Rome has sewers espa. They serve the rich neighborhoods. Your street is self-cleaning, by which we mean rain occasionally washes the filth into someone else's neighborhood. It's a system. You walk carefully, avoiding puddles and people. A cart barrels past you, pulled by donkeys and driven by a man who seems genuinely angry that pedestrians exist. There are no sidewalks. There are no traffic laws. There is only instinct, prayer, and the faint hope that the gods are paying attention. You pass temples where people line up to offer sacrifices, flowers, coins, small animals, or the occasional desperate plea. You don't have anything to give, so you nod awkwardly at Jupiter's statue and keep moving. He probably wasn't listening anyway. If you're headed to Workand, most likely you are. Congratulations. That means you didn't starve to death. Yesterday, work in ancient Rome is not fulfilling. It is not purpose-driven. It is survival in a tunic. You might be a laborer hauling bricks or mixing mortar for one of the emperor's new vanity projects. Or maybe you're a porter carrying goods up and down stairs in a building with no structural integrity. You might be a street cleaner, a fish seller, a potter, or worse, a public latrine attendant, paid in pity and bronze coins to sweep filth off marble and pretend your soul isn't slowly escaping through your nostrils. The hours are long, the pay is miserable, and your boss might beat you for fun. If you're a slave, you don't even get paid, you just work. And if you complain, you're whipped. If you collapse, you're replaced. If you die, well, someone else gets your blanket. Rome's climate is hot, sticky, and utterly unbothered by your suffering. There's no air conditioning, no shadin', lest you cling to a building's shadow like a sweaty ghost. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your sandals, if you have them, slap against the stones with every exhausted step. And if you don't, your feet are slowly becoming part of the pavement. Lunch, it's called prandium. And if you're lucky, it's more bread, maybe a bit of cheese, maybe dried fruit or a boiled egg, if your employer had a good gambling night. You eat sitting on a step, watching richer Romans being carried around in litters like mobile royalty. You chew and try not to think about how you're probably consuming sand and rodent hair. As the day wears on, the smells intensify. The streets reek of sweat, garbage, and garum. You pass a bakery, and inhale deeply the scent of fresh bread, temporarily tricking your brain into thinking life is worth it. Then you remember, bread is taxed. Your landlord raised rent again, your water jar cracked last night, and your cousin is still sick with whatever plague is currently fashionable. You keep walking. You keep surviving because, in ancient Rome, that's the entire point. And finally, after hours of back-breaking labor, social humiliation, and a mild sunstroke, you make your way home. You ascend the stairs of your insula carefully because the staircase is made of splintered wood and shame. One misstep, and you're joining the spirits of the fifth-floor tenants who fell last week. You reach your door. You enter. It's dark, cramped, and smells like boiling cabbage even, though you don't have any cabbage. Someone is already asleep in your corner. You don't ask who they are. You just lie down next to them and close your eyes, hoping you don't dream about the bucket. And with that, your Roman morning ends. Was it glorious? No. Was it dignified? Absolutely not. But you survived. And in ancient Rome, that counts for something. Tomorrow, you get to do it all again. You've survived your first Roman night in the insula, barely. Sleep came in waves, interrupted by creaking floorboards above shouting neighbors, the distant rumble of wagons, and an itching sensation on your leg that you'd rather not investigate. You're hungry now, not the kind of hunger that inspires a brunch outing or a carefully measured protein shake. This is more primal, heavier. Your body wants fuel, but the Romans didn't believe in breakfast as a significant meal, not in the way we do. They had a word for it, yentaculum, a small early meal typically consumed by those who had to work long days. For the rich, it might consist of bread dipped in wine, cheese, olives, or even a bit of fruit. But you're not rich. You're a plebeian one of thousands crammed into the belly of the city, eking out a life in the shadow of Rome's grandeur. For someone of your station, Yent is more of a formality than a feast. Maybe a crust of coarse bread, dry and unevenly baked. This bread is likely a leftover from the day before, or the day before that. Made from barley or spelt grain types considered suitable for the lower classes. It's dense, dark, and has the mouthfeel of something chipped from a wall. There's no butter, no jam, and certainly no eggs or honey. Those are the luxuries of someone with coin and status. What you might have if luck has smiled upon you is a bit of pulse. Pulse is the quintessential Roman peasant food, a porridge made from farro, emmer, or barley. It's cooked with water, and occasionally seasoned with a drizzle of oil or the faintest hint of herbs, assuming you have any. It's not pleasant. Exactly. It doesn't nourish so much as it fills a heavy, steaming paste that sits in the stomach like an anchor. On worst days, it might be prepared with river water or stored rainwater, slightly green and earthy. You eat it quickly, slowly, just gives your brain time to realize it tastes like boiled dampness, and yet this is your fuel. Pulse, maybe a bit of bread and water. If you're lucky, you've managed to secure some pasca, common drink among the poor and the military. It's made by mixing vinegar with water, sometimes infused with herbs, if available. It sounds unpleasant, it is, but it's far safer than drinking untreated water straight from a public fountain or reservoir. The acidity of the vinegar kills bacteria and masks the taste of unclean sources. It's sour and sharp, but it does the job. The public fountains of Rome flow constantly, fed by those legendary aqueducts. But that doesn't mean the water's clean where you live. Rome's water system was advanced, but only until it reached the labyrinthian lower districts. There, the water quality depended heavily on the maintenance of lead pipes and the cleanliness of the castella, the distribution tanks feeding your block. And maintenance wasn't always a priority in neighborhoods like yours. If someone upstream threw garbage, urine, or animal remains into the drainage channel, or worse, into the water itself, you'd never know until it was too late. Hunger is a quiet constant for you. Even when you eat, it never really fades. Food is expensive, and most of your earnings go toward rent, taxes, or staying on the good side of your local patronus. So you ration what little you have. You learn to chew slowly, savoring every bite like it's a luxury. There's no variety. You eat what's available. And more often than not, that means you eat the same thing every day. Meat almost never. The occasional salted fish, usually garam-cured scraps, or sardines, so pungent they could double as weapons. Meat is reserved for the upper classes, for religious festivals, or as part of a soldier's rations. If you do get your hands on some, it's awful. Organ meat, bones, things the rich don't want. You don't waste a single scrap. As for fruits and vegetables, they appear sporadically. You might find some wilted leeks, onions, or turnips in the marketplace at a discount near closing time. Apples and figs are seasonal, and while Rome's Mediterranean climate makes such things abundant, in theory, your wallet tells a different story. You buy what others don't. Split fruit, half-rotten dates, bundles of wilted greens, all wrapped in yesterday's gossip and grime. It's edible, technically, you hope, and if you're truly desperate, there's the street food. Rome had an active street food culture, particularly for the poor, who didn't have kitchens in their insula apartments. The poppynesmal taverns or hot food shops line the alleyways of working-class neighborhoods. For a few asses, the copper coins of the realm, you might get a bowl of stewed lentils, seasoned with whatever bones or drippings the cook could find, perhaps a small skewer of meat, heavily salted and suspiciously chewy, or a honey cake made from stale grain, barely sweet and baked hard enough to require soaking before eating. These places are busy, smoky, and loud. They smell like hot oil, burned flour, and sweat. The clientele includes laborers, criminals, out-of-work veterans, and the occasional freed slave. They're not always safe. Fights break out. Money disappears, but at least there, you get something warm. And you keep coming back. It's important to understand that most Romans didn't cook their own food. The lower classes lacked private kitchens. Fire laws made it dangerous to cook in cramped wooden apartments. So communal ovens and public eateries filled the gap. But that also meant you were always dependent on merchants, on bakers, on the shifting prices of olive oil and grain. Speaking of grain, it's the backbone of the Roman diet. The government knows this. That's why they introduced the unknown, the grain dola, lifeline for the urban poor, state-sponsored distribution of grain to eligible Roman citizens. If you qualify, you receive a monthly allowance enough to make bread or pools for a few weeks. It's not generous, but it's better than nothing. For many, it's the line between hunger and starvation. But access isn't guaranteed. You need to be a registered male and a Roman citizen. If you're a woman, a foreigner, or a slave, the unknowna isn't for you. You find other ways. Food for you is rarely fresh. Bread goes stale quickly. Pulls clings to the bottom of pots long after it should have been scrubbed out. What you consume today was cooked yesterday or last week. Spoilage is common. Flies are constant, but waste is unthinkable. You eat around the mold. You scrape off the bad parts. You chew slowly, savoring what little flavor remains. And yet, despite all of this, the city never starves, not completely. Rome's granaries are full, its imports steady. Ships from Egypt, Sicily, and North Africa sail in daily, their bellies full of grain, oil, and wine. The empire feeds its capital like a mother feeds a hungry child. You just don't always get your share. If you're a slave or a freedman in service, your meals depend on your master's whim. You might get stew, bread, or leftovers from the main table, or you might go hungry until someone remembers you exist. If you're a day laborer, your meal breaks are dictated by your work. Dig ditches, haul stones, build baths, and maybe mid-morning, you get 10 minutes to gnaw a piece of dried fig or drink from a shared cup. And let's not forget feast days, not because you're invited to the banquet, but because it's the one time the rich throw scraps to the streets. Religious festivals sometimes include public offerings, distributions of food or coin, perhaps a roasted pig or a platter of bread and fish for the masses. It's not kindness, it's politics. But you take what you can get. By mid-morning, your hunger has faded into something else, a dull pressure, a reminder. You've eaten just enough to continue. You tie the cloth belt around your tunic a little tighter and get moving. You've got work ahead of you. Rome doesn't wait, and tomorrow you'll eat again, or you won't. But either way, you'll wake up in the same insula, with the same cracked bowl and the same stale loaf waiting on a wooden shelf, because in ancient Rome, food is never far away, but neither is hunger. The sun has fully risen now, and the Roman day is underway. For you, a plebeian, or perhaps a slave, thought doesn't mean a slow stretch and a relaxing breakfast. It means the work begins, and it begins early. Rome is not a place of idleness for the lower classes. The empire may be vast, but the streets of the city feel like a funnel where the sweat of thousands filters upward to benefit the few. Let's start with the plebeians, not the poorest of the poor, but far from comfort. Most plebeians in the city work trades, manual laborers, builders, bakers, water carriers, cobblers, street sellers. If you're skilled, maybe you're a stonecutter, or you've secured a spot in one of the Roman guilds, the collegia. But for most, you're expendable muscle hired for the day, paid by the hour if you're lucky. You don't have a fixed schedule. You have a nida, relentless, gnawing one. You work because not working means not eating. You wake before dawn, grab what counts for breakfast, maybe a crust of bread or a spoonful of barley, mashand, head out to find work. The forum is one place you might go, not to debate philosophy, but to stand around and hope someone needs. A laborer. You're competing with hundreds of others. Some are stronger. Some have tools. You don't. You're hired maybe to carry bricks across a construction site. Rome is always being built. Roads, aqueducts, arches, homes for the rich. It is said Augustus found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. You'll be the one dragging that marble, sweating and silent. The work is brutal. There are labor laws, No unions, no breaks, no helmets, no complaints. If you fall off a scaffold, you're not given a dure, given a nod and a shove to the side so the next man can take your place. You don't ask questions. You don't slow down. The overseer watches with a stick in hand and he doesn't carry it for decoration. If you're not lucky enough to find a builder's job, maybe you end up in the tanneries. The smell hits you long before you reach the vats. Animal skins soaked in urine and dung to soften them, fermenting in the sun. You'll spend your day knee-deep in a mixture that would make a modern sewage worker gag. Gloves don't exist. You stir with your bare hands. The stench clings to you long after you live, and worse, it becomes normal. Still, you pee. Still, you persist because if you don't earn a few copper coins today, you won't be eating tomorrow. Your rent on that insula apartment crumbling, rat-ridden fire trap is due every few days. Miss a payment and you're out. No notice, no mercy. The landlord has 5 men waiting to take your place. But perhaps you're not a plebeian. Perhaps you're a slave. Life is somehow harder still, because now you don't even get the satisfaction of wages. Your body is labor, and your labor belongs to someone else. You might be a household slave owned by a moderately wealthy Roman citizen. If so, your work starts before sunrise. You're fetching water, cleaning floors, preparing meals you'll never taste. Maybe you're young and educated, signed to tutor the children or read aloud to your master. It sounds better. It isn't. One mistake and you're beaten. If the master's wife is displeased, you're sold. There are no protections. Number, court to hear your case. You are property like the stove or the sandals, or you're a field slave outside the city, toiling in the vast latifundia, those enormous agricultural estates that feed Rome's grain-hungry stomach. Here, there are no roofs, no days off. You wake with the sun and bend until it sets. You plant, plow, harvest, sweat, no matter how hot, how cold, how sick you feel, you work. The overseer doesn't care if you collapse. There are chains for those who slow down. For those who run, there are whips. And for those who rebel, there's crucifixion public, one along the roads where others can see. Some slaves are trained for skilled labor, stone carving, pottery, weaving, but that doesn't make the whip any less real. It just means your blood stains a different kind of floor. And what of the women? If you are a woman slave or free, you labor, to not on the scaffold or in the forum, but in quieter ways that bleed just as much. You're grinding grain with a heavy stone handmill, your arms aching as you turn the corn hour after hour. You make bread, wash clothes, fetch water, tend fires, clean, mend, weave. If you're poor, you might also sell small goods in the street tour. Offer your services as a wet nurse or a midwife. In desperate cases, you might sell yourself. Prostitution is legal in Rome taxed. It is not a profession of glamour. It is survival. There are no toilets in your insula, no kitchens. Make do in the alleyways or public spaces. Fires are frequent. The stairs collapse. Your children are not safe, not from hunger, not from illness, not from the building itself. Life expectancy is low. Infant mortality is high. Your child's best chance is to survive to 5. After that, it's still a coin toss. And yet, Rome moves on. The senators debate. The aristocrats drink wine on shaded terraces. Their banquets are filled with stuffed dormice and honeyed dates. Below them, unseen, you sweat, bleed, and endure. Your work is invisible, but indispensable. The aqueducts flow, the grain ships arrive. The streets are swept because of people like you. Sometimes the monotony is broken, not for a festival or a feast, but for something worse, a fire, a collapse, a riot. Rome is a tinderbox of labor and inequality. The gap between the rich and poor isn't just wide, it's weaponized. If a fire starts in your insula, the ladders don't reach the top. There are no fire escapes. You carry your children, your pots, your life on your back and hope the flames stop before your floor is reached. Or maybe you're caught in a food riot. The grain is late, the bread is moldy, the people are hungry. You crowd the forum, shouting with the others, demanding your portion. The guards arrive, batons, shields, blood in the streets. You are dispersed, not heard. And then there's disease. Filth lines the alleys, latrines overflow. The Tiber, your drinking sources, also a sewer. You wash clothes in it, you bathe in it, you drink from it. Parasites thrive, illness spreads. You know the signs, a fever, the chills, a child coughing in the night. There is no doctor, no apothecary for your kind, only rest, prayers, and hope. And hope rarely comes, but still you work, because if you stop, even for a day, the city forgets you, the empire forgets you, and hunger remembers you very, very quickly. This is what it means to work in ancient Rome, not to build wealth or rise in rank or find fulfillment, but to survive, to endure, to hope that perhaps your children will have slightly fewer blisters on their hands than you did. It is not glamorous, it is not heroic. It is labor at its most brutal, its most thankless. The empire was not built by emperors. It was built on the backs of men, women, and children who worked until they brokened, then were replaced. Now, as the midday sun climbs overhead, your tasks are only half done. There is still cleaning, cooking, tending to the hearth, carrying water, hauling waste. Your stomach growls, your fingers cramp, your feet blister inside sandals that barely hold together. And no one is coming to relieve you. Not today, not tomorrow. Welcome to the workday in ancient Rome. You wouldn't last a single one. Congratulations, you've made it past the market, survived the street toilets, and managed not to get mugged for your shoes, if you were even lucky enough to have shoes. But now comes the real challenge, going home more accurately, climbing into the creaking, overcrowded, highly flammable tinderbox that you are expected to call home, your insula. You live in an insula, not because you chose it, but because you're poor. And in ancient Rome, poor people don't have houses, they have layers. Multi-story apartments, buildings packed so tightly that sunlight is more rumor than reality. Your insula is 6, maybe 7 stories tall. Illegal, technically, but so is half the city. And bribes are as Roman as togas. It's built of wood, clay, and wishful thinking, leaning slightly to one side, as if preparing to collapse out of sheer exhaustion. You climb the stairs slowly, carefully, because elevators haven't been invented yet, and the building sways when someone sneezes on the second floor. The higher you go, the worse it gets. Wealthier residents stay on the lower floors, better ventilation, easier access, and a lower probability of dying in a fall. You, on the other hand, are up near the roof where the air is thin, the ceilings are low, and the rats have built a local economy. There are no private rooms, no insulation, and definitely no plumbing. Just a single room shared with your family, your livestock, and any opportunistic creatures that wander in through the cracks. The walls are made of mud brick, and your door doesn't quite close. But you have a curtain. Luxury. And what about fire safety? Good question. Fire is your most constant, faithful threat, because every home needs fire to cook, to light, to warm. But there's no chimney, no ventilation, and no fire code. Open flames flicker from oil lamps and cooking vessels, inches away from the wooden beams that hold the whole place together. One spark, one gust of wind, and the entire block could be reduced to ash within the hour. Firefighters exist technically, but they are mostly slaves owned by the vigils, the Roman fire brigade, and they're more interested in watching your insula burn so they can demand a bribe to intervene. In 24 CE, Augustus formed the vigils to stop Rome from burning down every third Tuesday. But let's be honest, they're underpaid, overworked, and famously corrupt. If you can't pay, they'll let it burn and confiscate whatever's left. They call it enforcement. You call it a robbery with extra steps, so you live in constant fear of smoke. Every night you sniff the air before you sleep, wondering if that's dinner next door or the beginning of the end. Your belongings, what few you have, are always packed for a quick escape. A blanket, a bowl, maybe a small idol of Lares or Penates, the household gods, who at this point you're hoping accept bribes to dot, and then there's the noise. Rome is never quiet. Carts aren't even allowed during the day, so they all roll through the streets at night. The wheels grind like thunder on stone. Vendors shout, drunks sing, lovers argue, dogs bark, and someone, somewhere, is always playing a flute badly. Privacy is a fantasy. Your neighbors hear everything, your arguments, your snoring, your gastrointestinal tragedies, and in return, you hear theirs. But maybe it's better than being alone, because loneliness isn't common here. Your insula is crowded beyond reason, dozens of families, crammed into units smaller than a modern bathroom. Children crying, adults arguing, old folks muttering prayers in dark corners. Sometimes people rent just a corner of a room, sleeping upright against the wall like human coat racks. When it rains, your roof leaks. When it doesn't, it still leaks. The water trickles down the inside walls, pooling on the floor, feeding the mold that grows behind your bed mat. The floorboards creak, the walls shift in the wind. You develop the uncanny skill of waking up seconds before the stairs collapse beneath a neighbor. It's not a matter of if the building will fall, it's a matter of when, and if that wasn't enough, pests. Rome's rodent population rivals its human one. Mice and rats scamper through your pantry, if you have one, and leave behind little gifts. Flies buzz thick around your food. Mosquitoes breed in the drainage ruts. And then there are the bedbugs. You scratch yourself raw in your sleep and dream of itching. But despite all this, you survive. You learn to maneuver the collapsing staircases like a seasoned acrobat. You hang wet laundry on lines that sway over the alley, hoping it dries before thieves pluck it. You carry water up and waste down, always careful not to slip in someone else's garbage or your own. Still, the insula is not your sanctuary. It is a holding penna, temporary space between disasters. Fires, floods, famine, and violence have all passed through this building like regular guests, and yet it stands just barely. There are moments strange and fleeting where you feel pride. A neighbor offers you stale bread. A child tugs your sleeve to show you a dead bird. The woman across the hall sings while stirring her pot of lentils. You smile even, if just for a second, because you all live in the same cage, facing the same storms. Rome is massive, over 1 million people land. The rich live in marble palaces with mosaic floors and private baths, but you know their lives only by rumor. For you, the insula is everything: your bed, your shelter, your prison. And if the building collapses tomorrow, and it might know, one will mourn it. The rubble will be cleared, and a new insula will rise in its place, faster, cheaper, even more dangerous. The cycle continues, and you, if you're lucky, will rent a corner in that new box and begin again. Because in ancient Rome, the poor don't rest, they adapt. They huddle together in the dark, dodging embers and curses, hoping that the next collapse doesn't start with them. And if the flames come anyway, well, you'll grab your blanket, say a quick prayer to the Lares, and run like hell. You're parched. You've spent the morning toiling in the heats, rounded by dust, noise, and the aggressive scent of humanity in full ferment. You want water, cold, clean, life-giving water, so you do what any Roman would do: you head for the nearest public fountain. Because in ancient Rome, you don't just turn a faucet and get crisp hydration. You rely on a sprawling, complex, and dangerously vulnerable infrastructure of aqueduct systems and communal outlets. And if any part of that system fails, so do you. Rome's aqueducts were a marvel of engineering. By the 1st century CE, the city was serviced by 11 massive aqueducts, some stretching over 50 miles from distant mountain springs. These channels brought in an estimated 200 million gallons of water per day, enough to supply baths, fountains, latrines, and private homes. But here's the catch: only the rich had indoor plumbing. For the rest of the population, meaning you line up at one of the many public fountains scattered through the city's neighborhoods, clay jug in hand, hoping there's still pressure in the system. Now, the good news is the water, when it gets there, is pretty clean. It's sourced from springs, and the aqueducts are designed with constant downward slopes to keep it flowing. The bad news: clean is relative. If you live near the terminus of the system, you're getting backwash water already passed through several baths, toilets, and industrial sites. Add to that the occasional sabotage, illegal tapping, or natural sediment buildup, and you're not exactly sipping spring water, more like tepid mineral soup with a hint of lead. Yes, many pipes are made of lead. Not that the Romans understood the long-term stormarological effects, but if your thoughts start feeling fuzzy and your coordination's off, don't blame the gods, blame the plumbing. And if you think that's bad, just wait until nature calls. Most Romans didn't have private toilets. Apartment dwellers, like you in your top floor, use pots, buckets, or chamber pots. When full, the contents are dumped out the window or into the nearest gutter. Yes, the famed Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maximus, still runs through the city like an underground lifeline. But most waste doesn't make it that far. It sits in the street, baking in the sun, mixing with animal droppings and slowly forming a biological miasma strong enough to peel paint off a fresco dot. And if you're wondering why shoes are so important in Rome, that's your answer. You're not walking on stones. You're walking on yesterday's dinner in its final form. There are public latrines, of course, and, if you're lucky or desperate, you can pay a small fee to use one. These are long stone benches with holes carved in them, positioned over flowing water channels. There's no partition, no door, just a row of strangers making eye contact while trying to pretend nothing awkward is happening. You sit shoulder to shoulder with a retired centurion and a 12-year-old olive vendor, contributing to the same stream of civic solidarity. The Romans believed in shared experiences. This was one of them. Toilet paper, not a thing. Instead, you use a tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick, kept in a bucket of vinegar water. It's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. You hope the guy before you had good hygiene. He didn't. Nobody does. You wipe, you stand up, you wash your hands and then you move on. Probably to the nearest bathhouse, which thankfully is where things get slightly better. The Roman bathhouse is part spa, part gym, part social network, and part biological experiment. There are over 800 public bath complexes in Rome by the time the empire is in full swing. Some are grand, like the baths of Heracleion, where marble columns soar above mosaic floors. Others are modest neighborhood baths, tucked between bakeries and brothels, but all follow roughly the same formula. A changing room, apodidarium, a warm room, tepidarium, a hot room, caldarium, and a cold plunge, frigidarium. You strip down, deposit your clothes. Good luck if they're still there when you get back, and start sweating your soul out in the heat. The caldarium is stifling, heated by hypocaust underfloor heating, fueled by roaring fires. It's a room designed to make you wish for death, or at least a breeze. You rub your skin with olive oil, not soap, because that's what Romans used to clean. Then you scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil, removing dirt, oil, and several layers of dignity. There are slaves to assist you if you're rich. If not, you do it yourself while trying to avoid eye contact with the senator next to you. Bathhouses are where deals are struck, gossip is traded, and diseases are casually spread. The water isn't drained between users. It's a warm microbial soup of humanity, stirred hourly by the movement of hundreds of unwashed bodies. Skin infections, eye diseases, intestinal worms, everything is on the menu. And yet, this is one of the cleanest places in Rome. Outside the baths, personal hygiene is a gamble. You might wash your face daily, and your feet often, but full-body bathing is more of a social event than a daily necessity. Perfumes and oils cover up most smells. Lice and fleas are common but tolerated. The concept of germ theory is centuries away, and nobody's counting bacteria when they're more worried about curses and crop failures. And remember that beautiful aqueduct system. It doesn't just supply water, it powers everything from grain mills to fountains to the flushing mechanisms in some elite homes' toilets. But it's fragile. Earthquakes, floods, or simple disrepair can shut down entire sections of the city. When the aqueducts break, Rome doesn't just lose drinking water, it loses its public baths, its sewers, its fountains. Civilization, as the Romans know it, starts to unravel. Riots have broken out over water shortages. The emperor himself maintains a staff of aquari water engineers just to keep the system running. And if they fail, you suffer, because in ancient Rome, access to clean water isn't a luxury. It's your last line of defense against cholera, typhoid, and a dozen other slow, filthy deaths. By now, your mouth is dry, your skin is itchy, and you're beginning to understand that clean is a relative concept. But here's the twisted part. By ancient standards, Rome is doing pretty well. The city is cleaner than most medieval capitals. It has public sanitation, latrines, baths, and even street cleaners. But it's also the biggest city in the ancient world, and that density breeds disease. Waterborne illness is rampant. Even minor stomach bugs can spiral into fatal dehydration. And if you're poor, which you rue, can't afford a private system or a servant to boil your water, you drink what's available, and you pray not to be purified, but to be spared. So the next time you fill a glass from the tap or flush a toilet with confidence, remember, in Rome, your survival depends on gravity, lead pipes, communal sponges, and the goodwill of an aqueduct built by a man who probably bribed his way through half the Senate. You don't control your water. You just hope it doesn't kill you. And on that hopeful note, it's time to think about lunch if your stomach can handle it. If you've managed to survive the slop of a Roman street, dodge dentistry from a clay cup of aqueduct runoff, and work a full day in the choking heat of the Subura district without keeling over, you might think a bath would be the one mercy this city offers you. And, to be fair, Rome is famous for its baths, but this isn't a hotel spa with cucumber water and lo-fi music. This is public bathing, Roman style. And for a plebeian like you, it's more about routine survival than luxury. Let's start with the setting. The massive public bathhouses, funded by emperors and designed to show off imperial grandeur, are sprawling complexes of steam, stone, and social politics. Think gym, barbershop, and social media feed all rolled into one. There are over 800 bathhouses across Rome by the 4th century CE, ranging from small balnea tucked into neighborhoods to monumental structures like the baths of Caracalla, which could host thousands of bathers a day. These places are architectural marvels: domed ceilings, mosaic floors, marble statues. But you're not here to appreciate the decor. You're here to clean yourself before your own body odor becomes a public health issue. Entry usually costs a quadrans, the smallest denomination of Roman currency, meaning it's technically accessible to almost everyone, even the poorest citizens. But just because you can afford to enter doesn't mean you belong. The hierarchy follows you through the door. Senators and equestrians recline in the hot pools and gossip in the tepidarium, while slaves like you scrub themselves with worn-out strigils in a corner. Let's start with the setting. The thermomassive public bathhouses, funded by emperors and designed to show off imperial grandeur, sprawling complexes of steam, stone, and social politics. Think gym, barbershop, and social media feed all rolled into one. There are over 800 bathhouses across Rome by the 4th century CE, ranging from small balnea tucked into neighborhoods to monumental structures like the baths of Caracalla, which could host thousands of bathers a day. These places are architectural marvels: domed ceilings, mosaic floors, marble statues. But you're not here to appreciate the decor. You're here to clean yourself before your own body odor becomes a public health issue. Entry usually costs a quadrans the smallest denomination of Roman currency, meaning it's technically accessible to almost everyone, even the poorest citizens. But just because you can afford to enter doesn't mean you belong. The hierarchy follows you through the door. Senators and equestrians recline in the hot pools and gossip in the tepidarium, while slaves like you scrub themselves with worn-out strigils in a corner, hoping no one important notices you tracking in street filth. The bathing process follows a predictable pattern. First, the appetiterium, or changing room. There are no private lockers. If you don't have a slave to guard your tunic and sandals, someone might walk off with them. Clothes are often stolen, here especially from the lower classes and the clothes watchers. Mostly enslaved boys are often in on the thefts. Lose your clothing, and you might be walking home barefoot, wrapped in shame and public laughter. Next is the palestra, the exercise yard. Yes, before bathing, Romans like to work up a sweat. You'll see men wrestling, lifting weights made of stone, or flinging javelins across the field. Some even box Roman style with metal-studded gloves called septus for the lower classes. This isn't just sport, it's a place to prove physical worth. But you're not here to make friends. You run a few laps, feign a squat or two, and head straight for the baths. Your muscles are too sore from hauling amphorae all morning inside the baths. You'll move from the cold frigidarium to the warm tepidarium, and finally to the blistering caldarium, where steam clings to the air and your skin. There's no soap. Instead, Romans coat themselves in olive oil, then scrape it off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil, taking dirt and sweat with it. If you're lucky, someone will help you, a friend, or more likely, another laborer just trying to speed things along. There's no privacy. You're naked among dozens of others, and the sounds of laughter, gossip, and grunts echo off the marble walls. This place is noisy, crowded, and hot. The air smells like a cocktail of oil, sweat, and mildew. Beneath the mosaic floors, fires rage in the hypocaust system, an ingenious heating network that uses raised floors and smoke tunnels to pump warmth into the caldarium. Slaves tend these fires all day, shoveling wood in suffocating rooms with no light and no fresh air. Some die from the heat, but their deaths make the marble hot to the touch. The cost of Roman cleanliness: the water is changed only occasionally, and filtration is a concept centuries away. You're bathing in a soup of skin cells, hair, oil, and whatever else floated off the last 100 bathers. People relieve themselves in corners. If someone bleeds during a rough shave or gets a nosebleed from the heat, that's just another addition to the communal brew. But in a city where fresh water is a gamble and soap is a luxury, this is the best you'll get. And this isn't just hygiene, it's civic ritual. Here, the bathhouse is where news spreads. Someone whispers that the emperor was spotted in disguise at the theater. Another boasts about his recent winnings at the ludi. A freedman offers political bribes in the tepidarium, while a prostitute waits in the hallway outside, pretending to be a masseuse for the poor. This is also a rare space where you're not fully excluded. Rich and poor alike sweat together. For a few minutes, you share the same steam as men who rule provinces. But there's a danger here, too. Bodies pressed together in humid air make perfect breeding grounds for illness. The plague of Cyprian, which will one day ravage the empire, spreads partly through bathhouses. Skin diseases, infections, lice, and fevers thrive here. The stone benches are often slick with something unidentifiable, and a misstep can send you slipping face first into a tiled pool lined with strangers. If you're injured, tough luck. The medicus in the corner knows less about sanitation than a modern child. Once you've scraped yourself clean and suffered the caldarium, you move on to the final step, the massage and oil rub down. Again, if you can afford it, most plebeians skip this, but let's say today is payday and you indulge. A low-ranking attendant slathers you in another round of olive oil, rubbing your limbs with rough hands and muttering in Greek or Aramaic. The oil stings the cracks on your skin, the cuts from the field, and the raw patch you got last week from walking barefoot. You smile through it. The pain is worth the brief illusion of luxury. Afterward, you dry off with a scrap of wool. Linen is expensive and return to your street clothes, now damp with sweat. You check the hooks in the appetiterium. Miraculously, your tunic is still there. You step outside, blinking against the sun. You're clean sort of, but the streets are still thick with dust, dung, and the smell of salted fish. Within 5 minutes, you're sweating again. Dirt clings to your sandals. A child vomits near your foot. The bath was never meant to last. Bathing in ancient Rome is not about cleanliness the way we think of it today. It's about participation, about appearing civilized in a society obsessed with cultus, grooming, display, and public performance. To be dirty is to be low, invisible, but to walk out of the thermy hair damp, oil glistening on your shoulders, is to momentarily rise above the grime of your station. Even if you'll return tomorrow to the same bucket of water and reused strigil. And if you think this is somehow indulgent, remember, for women, bathing was even more complicated. Separate hours or entire buildings were set aside. And while some enjoyed similar routines, many were kept at home, bathing with rainwater in cramped quarters. For enslaved women, bathing was sometimes done publicly by force under the scrutiny of leering men or cruel mistresses. For the wealthy, a balneum, a private bath inside their villa ensured you never had to mix with the masses. Heated by personal hypocaust, scented with imported oils from Arabia or Egypt, attended by silent slaves. But for the rest of Rome, the laborers, the couriers, the bakers, the sewer cleaners, the public bathhouse was a place of renewal, exhaustion, gossip, and risk. You went not to be healed, but to maintain the appearance of being human in a city that treats humanity like a fleeting luxury. The bath was not an escape. It was a pause from the heat, the stink, the fear, and the endless labor. It was a few minutes of semi-clean respite before stepping back into the furnace of Roman life. And with that fleeting relief, you head back out onto the cobbled road. Your feet still ache. Your skin is raw. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll do it all again. Let's talk about Roman food, not the banquets of emperors, reclining on silk cushions with figs dripping in honey, and servants fanning them with peacock feathers. You are not an emperor. You're not even close. You are, in fact, a plebeian working-class Roman in a cramped insula, where breakfast is less about indulgence and more about surviving another day with enough calories to walk, work, and not collapse. So, let's set the table, and by table, We mean whatever flat surface you can find that isn't covered in soot, bugs, or yesterday's crumbs. You eat with your hands because forks are still a few centuries from existing. Knives. Sharif, you have one, but even then, it's mostly for cutting bread or defending your lunch from rats. Your daily diet, and let's be generous, calling it that, is centered on one thing: grain. Specifically, kinds of wheat like far and speltand. A lot of it. You eat it boiled into pulse, a porridge as bland as it sounds. Think of it as the ancient Roman version of oatmeal, lonely, without sugar, milk, or any flavor at all. If you're lucky, it's salted. If you're really lucky, it has bits of onion or a drizzle of fish sauce known as garum to liven things up. That's right, fermented fish innards. It was the ketchup of the ancient world. It smelled like rot and seawater, and they poured it on everything. Bread, when you can get it, is dense, coarse, and made from stone-ground flour that might contain trace amounts of actual stone. Dental care isn't exactly booming right now, so every bite is a gamble between hunger and chipping a tooth. But bread is sustenance, and if you're a laborer or dock worker, it's essential. Rome even instituted a grain doltha, unknown to distribute grain to the poor. Without it, many urban citizens would simply starve. If you're on the list, you get your rations. If not, well, you'd better hope you have a skill, a patron, or a very forgiving neighbor. As for vegetables, they're seasonal and mostly whatever grows nearby: cabbage, lentils, chickpeas, leeks, the basics. None of it is particularly glamorous, but it keeps scurvy at bay. You might stew them into something vaguely edible if you have olive oil or herbs, but, again, you're not dining in the villa of a senator. You're working with what you can afford from the forum stalls, or grow in cracked pots on the rooftop, and don't expect variety. You eat the same things over and over, day after day, until famine comes, and then you don't eat at all. Meat. That's not for people like you. It's expensive. When it does enter your life, it's likely meat. That's not for people like you. It's expensive. When it does enter your life, it's likely from religious festivals, public feasts, or offcuts scavenged from butchers. More often than not, it's organ meat, boiled liver, intestines, trotters, lungs, the parts the wealthy don't want. You learn to chew fast and swallow faster. Spoilage is always a concern. There's no refrigeration, and what passes for fresh is heavily reliant on how tolerant your stomach is. If you live near the Tiber, the smell from the open-air markets might turn you vegetarian by necessity. Let's talk about the market, the Masalam. It's loud, chaotic, and covered in flies. Meat hangs from hooks, slabs of salted pork and strips of dried fish curl in the sun. Vendors shout, dogs bark, beggars loiter, and pickpockets glide through crowds like ghosts. You can buy fish, fruit, wine, beans, nuts, or eggs if you can afford them. Everything is haggled for, weighed on crooked scales, and bagged in baskets, or cloths you bring yourself. Your coin pouch tight beneath your tunic thumps nervously with every transaction. One bad purchase, and you don't eat tomorrow. Water, like everything else, is complicated. Rome is famous for its aqueducts, but the water doesn't always make it to the poor. You might have access to a public fountain where the water is cleanish. You might be drawing from a well near the latrines, where it's not. To be safe, many Romans, including children, drink diluted wine, not to get drunk, but because alcohol kills germs better than wishful thinking. A mix of water and cheap wine called Posca is the hydration of the masses. It tastes like vinegar and hope. Now, about those days when food runs out, famine is never far. A bad harvest in Egypt, a delay in grain shipments, or a corrupt official skimming off the top hand, the city's food supply collapses. Bread prices triple. Riots break out. People storm bakeries, loot warehouses, and sometimes lynch the bakers. The emperor is expected to intervene. If he doesn't, he risks becoming lunch himself politically, if not literally. During famine, you survive on scraps, moldy crusts, spoiled olives, stale beans, weeds from the roadside. You might boil bark or grind acorns. Pets vanish. The rats get smart. The pigeons disappear. People eat things they shouldn't. And when the plague follows the famine, as it often does, hunger turns to disease. Starvation weakens the body, and Rome's many illnesses move in like uninvited guests. There's another layer to all this: class. While you're trying to stretch a hunk of rye bread for 2 days, the elite are feasting. In the villas of the Palatine Hill, couches line banquet halls. Slaves serve platters of roasted dormice, honey-glazed songbirds, oysters, figs, and dates. Soaked in wine, they sip from silver goblets. They toss bones to the floor. They bathe between courses. For them, food is a performance. For you, it's a necessity that never stretches far enough. Even in death, food tells the truth. Wealthy Romans are buried with elaborate funerary feasts, their tombs adorned with carvings of banquets and gods pouring wine. The poor, maybe a piece of bread at your grave, your family can spare it. Maybe a final sip of Posca to send you off. In religious festivals, food becomes communal. Saturnalia, for instance, when masters serve slaves and everyone feasts together. But those days are rare and mostly symbolic. For the rest of the year, the lines are clear: who eats well and who begs. Let's not forget storage and spoilage. You keep food in clay jars, sealed with resin, or in baskets hung from ceilings to deter rats. Preserving food means salting, smoking, drying, or steeping it in vinegar. Still, everything has a clock. Bread molds quickly in the Roman humidity. Olives go rancid. Meat turns in the sun. Every meal is a gamble. Every bite is a risk. Even the insects eat well. Grain is stored in granaries, dark, warm, and crawling with beetles and moths. If you're lucky, you get your ration before it's infested. If not, most people don't even pick them out anymore. They're too small to matter. Children grow up with hunger. They learn to wait their turn. They learn which vendors give better scraps and which ones chase them away with sticks. Their bellies are often bloated from malnutrition. Their eyes dull. Parents do what they can. Sometimes it means stealing, sometimes begging, and sometimes going without, so the youngest can eat. Yet through all of this, food is still culture. Even in scarcity, Romans cling to tradition. They bake religious cakes, prepare funeral meals, mark solstices with special dishes. They cook with pride, share what little they have, and pass down recipes, thin, watery ones, from mother to daughter, father to son. The tools are crude, the ingredients simple, but the effort is there. In graffiti on the walls of Pompeii, we find complaints about bad bread, insults to tavern keepers, even jokes about watery wine. Food was a common frustration, a common joy, a common reality. You might not eat well, but you ate Roman, and that meant something. So, as you sit down with your cracked bowl of pulse, crust of tough bread, and cup of lukewarm pasca, you're not just surviving. You're participating in the daily struggle that defines the lower classes of the empire. You eat what you can, when you can, and pray for the unknown to arrive on time. Because if it doesn't, your next meal might not come at all. And now that you're fed sort of, it's time to go earn the next one. Because in ancient Rome, hunger is patient, but it always comes back. Religion in ancient Rome isn't something you do once a week. It's not a quiet, personal affair whispered in pews or practiced behind closed doors. In Rome, religion is everywhere, all the time. It's baked into the bricks of the forum, painted on the walls of your insula, and written into the very schedule of your day. You don't choose to participate. You live inside Eton. It watches you like the state, because, in many ways, it is the state. You wake before dawn, and already the gods are in your thoughts. Before stepping outside, you mutter a quick offering to the household spirits, the Lares and Penates. These are the guardians of your hearth and pantry, the invisible figures that ensure your home doesn't fall apart. There's no food left to burn for them this morning, just a crumb of dried bread and a half-hearted gesture of thanks. But it's the thought that counts. Sort of. You know the stories. Neglect the household gods, and your family could suffer. Illness, injury, or general misfortune. It doesn't matter if you believe it. Enough bad luck strung together starts to feel like divine punishment. Soon you're scrubbing the floor and lighting incense to try to win back their favor. Outside, the street is already alive with sounds. Hawkers bark from market stalls. Children dart between columns. Smoke rises in lazy curls from tiny shrines at the corners. These aren't just decorative, they're altars. Small, open-faced boxes holding flickering lamps, burnt offerings, and the thick scent of sacrificed animal fat. You pass them on your way to work. Maybe bow slightly, maybe don't. Someone always notices. Piety is social currency in Rome. Fail to observe the rites, and your neighbors won't just talk, they might accuse. The Roman pantheon is crowded. Jupiter rules the skies with thunder and ego. Juno watches over marriage, whether it's miserable or not. Mars is the god of war and masculinity, and Vesta keeps the sacred flame of Rome burning, a job so important that her priestesses, the Vestal virgins, are chosen as children and punished by death if they break their vows. That's the world you live in, one where virginity, fire, and political stability are all bound in a single thread, and where the divine is never more than a few footsteps away. Religion isn't optional, it's calendarized. Over 100 official festival days a year. Lupercalia, where half-naked men chase women through the streets in the name of fertility. Saturnalia, where slaves and masters switch roles for a day in a wild, upside-down mockery of freedom. And then there are the Consualia, Vinalia, Robigalia, and more. Festivals to crops, harvests, rain, sun, and even mildew. Yes, mildew, because in Rome every natural force has a name, a temple, and a priest. You, as a poor plebeian or freedman, can't afford expensive sacrifices, but the elite can, and they make sure you know it. Wealthy patrons slaughter bulls at the temples, their robes splashed with blood, incense thick in the air, while you stand at the back, clutching your small votive figurine, hoping the gods can hear your prayer from that far away. The ritual language is often old, Latin barely understandable, even to those reciting it, but the spectacle, that's clear enough. Religion is theater. It always has been. Can you take part when you can? Maybe your guild hosts a minor ceremony. Maybe you help lead a procession through the streets for a local deity. These rituals are public and communal, but also strategic. They reinforce your place in society, remind you of who rules, and give you a sense that however lowly your station, you're at least part of something bigger. Of course, not everyone thinks alike. By the 1st century CE, the Roman world is already deeply diverse. Foreign cults have seeped into the cracks of the empire. You might hear whispers of a mysterious Eastern goddess named Isis, whose followers wear white and chant in candlelit rooms, or a strange sun god from Persia, Mithras, whose rites involve secret underground gatherings and symbolic meals of blood and bread. These religions are sometimes tolerated, sometimes outlawed, and always watched with suspicion. Romans value order above all. Anything that smells of disloyalty or secrecy is dangerous. That's why, when Christianity begins to spread, it doesn't just make the authorities nervous, it enrages them. A religion without sacrifices, a God without a face. That's why, when Christianity begins to spread, it doesn't just make the authorities nervous, it enrages them. A religion without sacrifices, a God without a face, a group that refuses to honor Jupiter or Caesar. That's not just that's treason, treasonous. But you, in this moment, probably don't think about Christianity. It's still a strange foreign sect on the fringes of Roman cities. You've heard of them maybe, but your life is ruled by the gods of your ancestors, the expectations of your community, and the sheer momentum of tradition. Superstition is the second skin of daily life. You avoid walking under ladders not because it's unsafe, but because it invites bad luck. A black dog seen at night, omen of death, a sneeze. You immediately say, salve, not out of politeness, but to protect the soul from escaping. You know the signs. A bird flies to the left, bad news. Thunder after dusk, don't travel. Dreams are interpreted. Entrails are read, and omens are everywhere. Even the emperors consult augurs before battles or decisions. And it's not just the living you worry about. The dead don't stay quiet. Each year during the Lemuria, you perform rites to keep the restless spirits Lemuries from haunting your home. You toss black beans over your shoulder at night while chanting ancient words, hoping it satisfies the shades. If you forget, don't be surprised if things go missing, or if the air turns sour in the dark. The temples are grand. Of course, massive columns, gleaming statues, and priests in embroidered togas. But your real religion happens in the alleyways, kitchens, and bedroom corners of the working poor. You leave coins at roadside shrines. You tie ribbons to trees. You mutter charms when your child coughs too hard. You wear amulets around your neck to protect against the evil eye. A mosaic on your doorstep might feature a dog or a phallosaur, both to ward off danger. To a modern viewer, all this might seem superstitious or quaint. but to you it's life or death. Without antibiotics, germ theory, or psychology, you turn to the gods for explanation. Why did the fire start? Why did your baby die in the night? Why did the grain spoil in storage? The gods are fickle. You didn't do enough. You forgot an offering. You used the wrong words. Someone in your building insulted Mercury, and now everyone pays the price. And yet, despite all this, religion gives you meaning, a structure, a rhythm, a way to understand the chaos. When your child is born, you present it to the genius of the family. When you marry, you light the ceremonial torch and bind hands with sacred ribbons. When someone dies, you mourn for the prescribed number of days, burn their possessions, and whisper their name until your throat goes raw. Because in Rome, remembering the dead is how you keep them alive. To be forgotten is the true death. Why inscriptions fill the walls of tombs in Columbarian names, carved into stone so that someone, anyone, might remember them. And so you keep praying, offering, watching, not because the gods are kind, but because they are powerful. Not because the rituals are easy, but because they're necessary. You live in a city where divine favor and political favor are nearly the same thing, where neglecting a festival could be blamed for an earthquake, where sacrifice might avert plague, or not, but better to try than be accused of causing it. The day winds down. You pass another shrine, this one dedicated to Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings and endings. You stop, you bow, you whisper a few words you barely understand, because the gods are everywhere in this city. And in ancient Rome, the last thing you want to do is be noticed by one of them. The sun is low on the horizon now, casting long shadows across the uneven, cobbled streets of Rome. The smells of the city sewage, olive oil, smoke, and sweat cling heavier in the cool evening air. But you don't have time to notice. You're about to learn what it means to live in a world where justice isn't blind. It just chooses not to see people like you as a plebeian, a freedman, or worse, a slave. You exist at the very bottom of the Roman legal ladder. The law is not an abstract idea. It's a tool of control, written by the elite to protect property, preserve hierarchy, and make examples out of the lower classes. Forget equal rights. Justice in ancient Rome is transactional. If you lack wealth or connections, the law is less a shield and more a weapon pointed squarely at your neck. Let's say someone accuses you of theft. Maybe a fellow vendor claims you shortchanged him at the market. Maybe a neighbor thinks you stole a loaf of bread, or someone's sandals went missing and your name was mentioned. That's all it takes. You're hauled in for questioning, and the burden of proof doesn't fall on your accuser. It's on you. And in many cases, if you're a slave, it doesn't matter whether you're guilty or not. The only question is how much pain it'll take to extract your confession. Torture is not only legal in ancient Rome, it's expected, especially if you're enslaved. The logic goes like this. A slave has no honor, so they can't be trusted to tell the truth. Without persuasion, that persuasion comes in the form of whips, branding irons, and racks. You can be interrogated simply for being in the vicinity of a crime. If your master is murdered, all the slaves in the household can be tortured and executed regardless of guilt, just to make sure the true culprit is among the dead. Even as a citizen, your options aren't much better, less you're wealthy. Legal representation exists, But lawyers called advocata aren't paid in fees. They work for favors, social advancement, or because they're seeking political attention. And if your case is brought before a magistrate or in front of a public tribunal, you'd better hope your opponent isn't rich. Bribery is commonplace. Trials can be delayed indefinitely, and the judges are often members of the same elite class as the accusers. Connections matter more than evidence. Punishments are public, brutal, and designed to humiliate. Flogging, exile, and execution are on the table, but they scale with status. If a patrician commits a serious crime, they might be allowed to go into exile quietly, keeping their wealth and titles. If a plebeian does the same, it's chains, lashes, or worse. Execution methods vary. Beheading is considered relatively merciful, clean, quick, and reserved for Roman citizens. If you're not a citizen, crucifixion is far more likely. It's agonizing and public reserved for slaves, rebels, and the lowest criminals. You'll be stripped, whipped, nailed to wood, and left to die in the open. The birds will arrive before you're even gone. Romans view this not just as punishment, but as spectacle. One last degrading performance before death. But not every crime gets you executed. Petty theft might earn you a beating or branding. You could be tied to a post and scourged in the forum for passersby to jeer at. Repeat offenses might get you sold into slavery even if you were born free. Rome has no concept of rehabilitation. You're either useful to the state or you're disposable. Now imagine you're caught in debt. Maybe a bad harvest forced you to borrow grain. Maybe your family needed medicine. Debt in ancient Rome is dangerous. If you can't pay it back, your creditor has the legal right to seize your property or your body. You can be imprisoned, sold as a bonded servant, or forced to labor to pay off what you owe. The system is predatory and it's meant to keep the lower classes forever straining just to survive. And don't expect privacy or calm. Justice happens in public spaces. Forum, the basilica, sometimes even the market. Crowds gather to watch the proceedings, cheer on accusers, or jeer at defendants. For the Roman public, justice is part legal process, part blood sport, and part civic theater. But perhaps the most chilling aspect is this: the law is deeply intertwined with spectacle. Rome's public games, executions, and military punishments blur the line between civic order and entertainment. Criminals sentenced to die might be thrown to wild beasts in the amphitheater. This isn't metaphor, it's a Tuesday. A prisoner convicted of treason or theft could be chained and released into the Colosseum, unarmed, to be mauled by lions, leopards, or bears, to the delight of thousands of spectators. The screams echo. The crowd roars. The Senate nods in approval. The logic behind this is both pragmatic and cruel. These executions are warnings, reminders of who holds power. And if they happen to distract the public from grain shortages, political scandal, or border unrest, the better. For Roman women, the law offers even less protection. A husband can legally kill his wife if she's caught in adultery. A father can disown or execute his child under patria potestas, the absolute power of the male head of household. Domestic abuse isn't a crime, it's a family matter. In theory, a woman can take legal action. In practice, she is silenced by layers of custom, intimidation, and institutional indifference. Religion is no safe haven either. If you're accused of impiety, failing to observe proper rites, speaking against the gods, or accidentally disrupting a sacred procession, you can be punished swiftly and without appeal. Rome doesn't separate church and state. To question religion is to threaten the republic itself. There are prisons, yes, but not as punishment. They are holding pens, temporary jails, where the accused wait for trial, execution, or sentencing. They are dark, filthy, overcrowded, and filled with despair. Most don't leave alive. The Tullian Mome's most infamous prisonees, a damp underground dungeon. Prisoners sent here are either destined for death or forgotten entirely. Even if you're innocent, your life can unravel fast. A single accusation can lead to financial ruin, social disgrace, or permanent injury. Witnesses can be bribed. Testimony can be coerced. And even as a citizen, your options aren't much better, less you're wealthy. Legal representation exists, but lawyers called advocati aren't paid in fees. They work for favors, social advancement, or because they're seeking political attention. And if your case is brought before a magistrate or in front of a public tribunal, you'd better hope your opponent isn't rich. Bribery is commonplace. Trials can be delayed indefinitely, and the judges are often members of the same elite class as the accusers. Connections matter more than evidence. Punishments are public, brutal, and designed to humiliate. Flogging, exile, and execution are on the table, but they scale with status. If a patrician commits a serious crime, they might be allowed to go into exile quietly, keeping their wealth and titles. If a plebeian does the same, it's chains, lashes, or worse. Execution methods vary. Beheading is considered relatively merciful, clean, quick, and reserved for Roman citizens. If you're not a citizen, crucifixion is far more likely. It's agonizing and publicous for slaves, rebels, and the lowest criminals. You'll be stripped, whipped, nailed to wood, and left to die in the open. The birds will arrive before you're even gone. Romans view this not just as punishment, but as spectacle. One last degrading performance before death. But not every crime gets you executed. Petty theft might earn you a beating or branding. You could be tied to a post and scourged in the forum for passersby to jeer at. Repeat offenses might get you sold into slavery if you were born free. Rome has no concept of rehabilitation. You're either useful to the state or you're disposable. Now imagine you're caught in debt. Maybe a bad harvest forced you to borrow grain. Maybe your family needed medicine. Debt in ancient Rome is dangerous. If you can't pay it back, your creditor has the legal right to seize your property or your body. You can be imprisoned, sold as a bonded servant, or forced to labor to pay off what you owe. The system is predatory and it's meant to keep the lower classes forever straining just to survive. And don't expect privacy or calm. Justice happens in public spaces, the forum, the basilica, sometimes even the market. Crowds gather to watch the proceedings, cheer on accusers, or jeer at defendants. For the Roman public, justice is part legal process, part blood sport, and part civic theater. But perhaps the most chilling aspect is this: the law is deeply intertwined with spectacle. Rome's public games, executions, and military punishments blur the line between civic order and entertainment. Criminals sentenced to die might be thrown to wild beasts in the amphitheater. This isn't metaphor, it's A Tuesday, a prisoner convicted of treason or theft could be chained and released into the Colosseum, unarmed, to be mauled by lions, leopards, or bears, to the delight of thousands of spectators. The screams echo. The crowd roars. The Senate nods in approval. The logic behind this is both pragmatic and cruel. These executions are warnings, reminders of who holds power. And if they happen to distract the public from grain shortages, political scandal, or border unrest, all the better. For Roman women, the law offers even less protection. A husband can legally kill his wife if she's caught in adultery. A father can disown or execute his child under patria potestatis, the absolute power of the male head of household. Domestic abuse isn't a crime, it's a family matter. In theory, a woman can take legal action. In practice, she is silenced by layers of custom, intimidation, and institutional indifference. Religion is no safe haven either. If you're accused of impiety, failing to observe proper rites, speaking against the gods, or accidentally disrupting a sacred procession, you can be punished swiftly and without appeal. Rome doesn't separate church and state. To question religion is to threaten the republic itself. There are prisons, yes, but not as punishment. They are holding pens, temporary jails, where the accused wait for trial, execution, or sentencing. They are dark, filthy, overcrowded, and filled with despair. Most don't leave alive. The Tullian Murome's most infamous prisonees, a damp underground dungeon. Prisoners sent here are either destined for death or forgotten entirely. Even if you're innocent, your life can unravel fast. A single accusation can lead to financial ruin, social disgrace, or permanent injury. Witnesses can be bribed. Testimony can be coerced. And evidence, when it exists, is often little more than rumor wrapped in a toga. The irony is that Rome sees itself as the pinnacle of civilization. And in many ways, it is. It has an advanced legal code, courts, appeals, and procedures, written into stone. The 12 Tables, published in the 5th century BCE, were hailed as a step toward justice for all citizens. And later reforms, introduced by emperors like Augustus and Hadrian, did try to standardize trials and offer protections. But those reforms don't reach everyone, especially not you. You're a peasant, a tradesman, a former slave, a woman without a dowry, a child without a father. In Rome, justice wears a toga, but it walks with a blade. So what do? You try to stay invisible. You keep your head down, avoid debt, avoid conflict, and pray your name never comes up in a whisper that matters. Because here in the shadow of the Palatine Hill, justice isn't about what's fair. It's about who holds the power and how willing they are to use it. Tomorrow you'll wake up and try again to survive the Roman day. But tonight, sleep lightly, because in ancient Rome, justice may come at any time. And it rarely knocks twice. By now, you've endured sewage in your stew, slept under lice-infested wool, and labored under a sun that bakes clay. You've chafed, bled, and aged 2 decades in a single day. But even in ancient Rome, all roads eventually lead to one place. Death. And for you, a poor plebeian or slave with no name worth carving, your journey ends without honor, ceremony, or even certainty. Let's not sugarcoat it. Death came early, and it came often. For the Roman poor, life was less a candle gently extinguished, and more a torch that flared. sputtered, and was abruptly snuffed out by accident, infection, starvation, or violence. You didn't so much pass away as fall apart. Life expectancy in Rome hovered somewhere between 25 and 30 years. That number is skewed by the high infant mortality rate. Nearly 1 in 3 babies didn't survive their first year. But even if you made it past childhood, you lived hard and died young. A minor fever might spiral into sepsis. A broken bone could fester into gangrene. A minor cut in the wrong part of the slums might mean a slow rot with no cure. Penicillin. That's 18 centuries away. Let's say you don't die violently. Let's pretend you just waste away, as many did. In that case, your last days are spent in a cramped tenement apartment, reeking of chamber pots, your breath wheezing through cracked lips. No hospitals, no nurses. If you're lucky, a relative might hold your hand, but just as often, your body is found days later, stiff and still, the rats already curious. So, what happens next? If you're a slave, your property, your body will be dumped without ceremony in a mass grave called a puticuli, a pit filled with layers of anonymous corpses decaying in the sun outside the city walls. No headstone, no urn, no prayer, just the quiet churn of decomposition. These pits were Roman efficiency at its most callous. Hundreds of corpses dumped, covered in lime to mask the stench, then forgotten. If you're a free poor Roman, you might fare marginally better. Your family, if they can afford it, might pay a burial club, a collegium, to secure you a small funeral. These clubs were the closest thing to insurance for the working poor, pooling dues to provide the bare minimum, a proper cremation or burial, and a modest ceremony. You might even get a small plaque or terracotta urn if your family scraped enough coin together. But if they didn't, back to the pit you go. Now, let's talk about what the Romans believed came next. The afterlife, according to traditional Roman religion, was a murky and uninviting place called the underworld. It was neither paradise nor punishment, just a continuation of existence, only dimmer. The souls of the dead wandered restlessly unless properly appeased with food, drink, and ritual. The poor couldn't afford grand rites, which meant many spirits were believed to linger as hungry, vengeful shades. The wealthy, of course, had tombs, mausoleums, engraved sarcophagi, and elaborate rituals. Some had their ashes stored in beautiful marble urns inscribed with poetry. Their names would be spoken for generations. You, on the other hand, may have never had a full name recorded at all. And the worst part, death wasn't even safe from politics. If you were executed, your body might be denied burial altogether if convicted of treason or sacrilege. Criminals were crucified, left to rot as a warning, their bones scattered by dogs. Others were condemned to damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, where their names were scratched off records, statues defaced, their identities erased from history. There's something uniquely cruel about dying twice, once in the body and once in memory. Let's pause for a moment. You've lived this entire day as a nobody in ancient Rome. You've eaten spoiled lentils, relieved yourself in a broken pot, fought rats for a spot to sleep, and collapsed after hauling bricks, firewood, or wet laundry in the relentless sun. And now, after all that, your death is quiet, unrecorded, and statistically expected. It would be easy to end the story here in silence, buried beneath a mound of others just like you. But history isn't only about endings. Sometimes it's about perspective. So, let's take a breath. Right now, you're probably lying in a bed real, one with blankets that aren't alive. You likely have access to Medici.